Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Let's Cover Korea. dGon here alongside Wolf, and we're here to tell you that despite going 5-0 in the road to MSI Round 2 qualifier against KT, Dplus Kia failed to make it in here, Wolf. It was one of the biggest throws that I feel like it's top 3 throws that I've seen.
It's so there's so many things to say about this. For example, whoever wins is going to play against GenG while you're watching this series the entire time. So as I said when I was commentating this, I'm hoping for a very dominant win for whoever wins so that you can feel like there's a hope that they could beat GenG or at least make that series relatively interesting in the road to MSI Roadshow in Wanju, because that's what this is all for. So this matchup felt incredibly important because it also meant that you'd be able to play in front of a huge crowd, which is every player's dream, right? Every org's dream. You're gonna get more eyes on you. Your sponsorships get more, eyes on them, et cetera, et cetera. It's a huge deal to be able to play in that venue. And instead, we got a series where nobody played very well at all, and the series became, by the end of it, for me, more about the fact that Dplus failed than that I was interested that KT won. I just kind of I was like, okay, KT kind of did it. It was impressive. They scaled. They waited for their moment, but they lost every game. They lost every game until they suddenly won it. Game 3 was a little bit different. Like game 3, they had a lot of control, but it was the smallest gold lead out of any of the 5 games, by the way. All the other 4 games, Dplus's gold lead was massive, and KT was holding on to like a 1,000 to 2,000 gold lead or something like that in game 3. That's KT's MO, which I did mention on the cast as well, but it became so much to me about Dplus's failure and wondering, what does this mean? Like, what is going on in this team? How can they lose these games? To then be, instead of celebrating KT winning, because KT is absolutely going to get bodied by GenG, and it's not going to be fun. It's not interesting. So now it just feels like Dplus got this insane mental smackdown. Like I don't know how they recover from this at EWC. I don't know how they recover from this, going into round 3, because this has got to really hurt. And for KT, they're not even hyped about the win. They're like, well, okay, we basically didn't. Cuz in his post-game interview was like, there were a lot of problems. There were a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And he acknowledged his play was not great. And I think KT was like, guess we get to go to Wonju and lose to GenG.
Yeah. I mean, again, as you said, it is every team's, bonus to go to those live events, to be around a crowd that is larger than the 300 to 400 that we have at Lol Park, depending on the day, because the lobby can fill up. Wonju, I think the stadium is 2,000. Let's see, DB Wonju Arena.
I think it's a little bit more than that.
I'm checking capacity. Originally the plan was 6,000 seats, but now it is 4.6. So almost 5,000 seat arena, and that doesn't include the ground floor where they add a lot of seats. So we'll say like 5,000 fans there in Wonju. It'll be a lot of fun. KT will probably get the smackdown, because it wasn't just Cuz. I mean, Cuz had an uncharacteristically bad series. He was very much a passenger. But Wolf, effort as well. Like, I'll give credit to effort. We got to hear the comms in game 3 when they got their first win. They ended with a penta for aiming. Nobody cheered. No one said anything. But the person that was still making the calls and still talking the whole time was effort, which is what we assumed was the reason why he joined this team, compared to President Palu and Ghost. It was, he's going to keep talking and be the engine so that BDD can focus, so that Cuz can secondary shot call. But Cuz wasn't even doing that, man. So I think that's why we have it so skewed on, like, this was Dplus's failure than KT's success.
Yeah, I mean, Cuz was literally invisible in the first 2 games, especially game 1. Game 1 was a travesty. He was getting out jungled by early game Wukong, and it just felt like, when I saw that, I said, well, this is just not going to be a series, And then we went into game 2 and the dominance there, and I think it was not 8 minutes into the game. Somewhere between 8 and 10 minutes, I think, is where on the cast I started talking about, is a reverse sweep possible? because we didn't even get to talk about, is a comeback in this game possible?
Yeah.
And they did it. And they did it through really slow play. The Sivir game was great. Obviously, in the final game, they were able to catch Siwoo again in that final fight. They caught Siwoo on the Jax in the previous game. So Siwoo, he messed up. You know, he messed up in a big way. A lot of he had a lot of agency in those games. Like, I think he was in a position to actually pop off and carry on the Jax. And we've seen players like Zeus in these positions, players like Doran, and even occasionally like someone like Rich with Jax just find the right angle, come in at the right time, have really good judgment, and just get on top of that 80 carry and kill him. In the case of Siwoo, he was just like, it almost felt like he was just looking at the rest of his teammates and right clicking on the ground and not remembering like where his champion was and the way he was pathing towards the enemies. In the game 5 catch, you know, his position was to look for a cross where he's holding a flank angle and the rest of the Dplus is trying to hold the position on the dragon pit, and he just was too close to KT. And so they BDD made the call like, we can kill this guy, and they killed him, and then they won the game. That one is a little bit more forgivable for me than the Jax play in game 4, but either way, you know, he made 2 errors that cost them ultimately the series when they were in such a winning position. And I think we all wonder like what happens in the post game discussion there, like, and what happens in what's going to happen between now and EWC for cvMax and crew. Like, how loud did cvMax get? How intense did he get? How much did he put his feet on the couch with no socks on? You know, like we've seen in the content videos.
Yeah.
So I wonder for Dplus's mental now. You know, like what happens to especially these really young players who haven't found the success that they found in challengers, that I feel like they believe that they deserve, that they believe they think they can earn.
Yeah. And that's I want to get to that and really dig into that, because I think this core of D plus is so fascinating now, because they're not being defined by wins. They've been defined by these soul crushing, heartbreaking losses, including last year, the guy that just beat them this year in aiming, getting hooked in the Smolder game by the Blitzcrank hook. Like, he was a part of that train wreck. And now he got to exercise those demons multiple times in a way where everyone knew that's what he was doing. There was that one D+ sign that was trying to get revenge on him writing cvMax's name, and the fan had Aiming's name on it with the terror signs in the middle. When it was 2-0, and that, as Wolf said, that game too, we pulled our highlights for the series in the first 8 minutes of the game, and we were done. We were talking about pizza and we're watching the game, but really we were like, there's no comeback angle here. That fan was like, ooh, he started like doing the little baby tear, and then we never showed him again. We should have gone back and found him, been like, hey, do we just tape it back together? Like, what's up? But I think I want to go back to Siwoo specifically because he's been the focal point of a lot of online hate from the Korean community. And I think good coaches, because you're not getting rid of Siwoo, shitting on him does no good. He knows that everyone saw that he died early. I think good coaches would find the points earlier where the team had agency. They had leads, right? Why did you get to the point where there was Elder Dragon? It's because your team had soul. You had all the Drakes. Like, it can't just be the game losing play where the focal point is if you're the coach. And I don't think it would be fair to this young, hyper-talented player to take the brunt of the blame there.
And you know, in the loss that KT had to T1 in that crazy comeback that we discussed, you know, a few months ago, it was a similar story for KT where they had the lead, but they didn't know how to go to Baron and look for a turn. They didn't know how to use the map and the lead that they had to force T1 into an uncomfortable position. And then Peyz just farmed up and scaled up on the Aphelios, and the rest is history, right? The Sivir game was kind of the same thing. And it almost feels like, in a way, and I kind of wish I realized this and mentioned this on the cast because it would have been a cool callback, but in a way, maybe KT learned in that loss what to do to Dplus from 10,000 gold behind, and just be like, well, if you guys aren't going to be decisive, we'll just keep farming and look for a punish angle. And eventually they found it, and eventually they won. And that type of play, I think, is not going to fly against GenG or T1, because they will make all the right calls from ahead, right?
Yeah.
On Life Esports will make all the right calls from ahead. The big three, the top three here in the LCK will not lose those games ever that Dplus lost. But Dplus still has this problem where there's, and it feels like in games 1 and 2 they knew what to do, right? In games 1 and 2 they knew how to push their lead, but in game 3, where it's a little bit, it starts to get a little bit ambiguous. The wave clear is too much to deal with. Their draft was a little shaky, right? Game 1 and 2 we were like, oh, KT's draft doesn't even make sense. Game 3, KT had a good draft. They had the wave clear, they had the answers, and it started to seem like there was some sort of uncertainty rather, settling in Dplus's players. And then when they lose that game, the confidence is gone, and you start to doubt, and then you start to mess up your shot calls, and then you start to go, can we do this Baron? Should we do this Baron? Are we able to control vision here and then look for a turn? Does our comp turn that well? You start to look at like your lack of engage, and you're like, well, I don't know if we can do this. Maybe we should just wait for them to come to us, and maybe they'll make a mistake. And then you end up trying to make a proactive play on the Jax rotation, and you're the one who makes the mistake. You're the one who loses the game. And there was obviously the big, like, completely unnecessary throw in the mid lane that happened in game 3 as well, where they just kind of walked into KT and died, which was quite bizarre. I think in those moments you could just see the paralysis is there. Like, they don't know how to decide what to do. And so I agree with you in that those 2 moments were the defining moments of the loss, because they were the domino, or the last nail in the coffin, whatever you want to say. Like, it was the moment where the neck was snapped of Dplus when he died in both those times. Like, oh, okay, KT has the man advantage. They're going to win this now. It's done.
Yeah.
But it's everything that led up to that puts Siwoo into that position. That's the real problem. Like, Siwoo should never have been like, I need to rotate on Jax to close this game out 9,000 gold ahead and try to see if I can find a flank angle. It should have been that they were able to close the game out way, 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 way earlier with better macro and better objective control. And the fact that that didn't happen is where the real conversation needs to start, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm looking at, I just took a second while you're making those points to take a look at the vision control, and the vision just isn't correct. Like, because KT have Sivir, that is like infinite wave clear, they never synced up the waves with their split push. The vision was on top side for a Baron that was up in like 2 minutes. And so they're thinking, oh, we'll use Baron to try and close the game out, rather than there's an open inhib on the bottom side, and then they have just their inhib towers in mid and top. It put the Jax down there. Like, put the Jax down there to open up that game and use 4 in the mid lane. Instead, they were trying to use, they're trying to 1-3-1, and then Jax just recalls to finish like a Warden's Mail. Like, he cloth armor into Warden's Mail isn't going to help you with anything later on in the game. And I think this then goes on the youth of Career. And when I think about it, Career has had such highlight plays. He is the front runner and should win Rookie of the Year because of his plays, right? We've had him on Mad Movie multiple times, the Seraphine ult, the Bard play. But I think understanding of how to ward to allow the rest of your team to be able to split push 38 minutes into the game when you're trying to close out a tough game, like, that's experience and something that I think needs to be paid more attention to. And that's where the learning lesson to me would come from. Showmaker, Lucid, you got to tell him where to put his vision.
That's what I was going to say.
Siwoo fucked it up.
Because I think also, because Siwoo is pretty young and also pretty silent and a pretty quiet player. Like, I think even someone is, I don't want to say Doran is timid, but he's not an ego player. He's not a player who's going to be like, what's going on? There's no vision. But I think even Doran would have, if Doran was playing on this team, and if he's more experienced, he's a little bit more vocal, he'd be like, yo, Career, can I get some wards down here? I'm actually trying to push like this, and I actually need a little bit more information. I think he would say that. And Keria doesn't need to be told, obviously, on T1. Keria's already done it. But, like, I think the fact that Siwoo doesn't maybe necessarily have the confidence, or is just also too inexperienced, even though he's got a little bit more experience now, is maybe still even too inexperienced to, like, know that that's what's the problem. And if he does know, maybe he is a little bit shy to tell Career, who's probably shot calling a lot of other stuff right at that time, and he doesn't want to be like, by the way, I need boards, because everyone's panicked and everyone's stressed out, and the game isn't ending. And I think everyone who's played even a long solo queue game that hits 40 minutes when you're ahead, you start to wonder like, man, at 40 minutes, anything can happen. If we make one mistake, like you lose this game. Everyone knows that sinking feeling where you're playing Jinx in the bottom lane and you got 6 kills by 20 minutes and you're fed and you're like, there's no way we can lose this game. But then things are starting to go wrong everywhere else, and 5v5 fights are happening where you're not just like, dunking on the guy in the mid lane because you're super far ahead. You're like, oh, I have to watch out for the top lane. The top lane is kind of, he's got some angles, we don't have vision everywhere. Like I kind of have to like really focus up. I can't just win by my default massive lead. You start to have that sinking feeling of like, I could lose, and often you do lose it, right? And in solo queue games, that I think feeling is probably what starts to compile upon itself even as you start to get reverse swept in a series where you had such a lead and you had the lead in the game in question. And it can be hard to overcome that if you're not in a strong place mentally. Because we always talk about how a lot of players have strong mental fortitude, and some players have stronger than others, right? And KT showed they really have it, by the way, in this series. But not everyone has it, and I think it's up to what the team's going through at the time, what they're feeling, and what every player is feeling, what your feeling of the atmosphere of the team is. I think that's a huge difference that we saw from Hanwha Life from LCK Cup to what we saw from them in their dominant run in LCK rounds 1 to 2, is that they clearly felt in a better mental place when they started that streak, and they were confident, they trusted each other, they played through Kanavi's play style, and everything comes together. But when you're starting to wonder, like, should we be side laning here, or like, can Siwoo handle this, and the warding isn't good, then you make mistakes and you can't close games out. Then you make more mistakes. So I think there was a psychological element to what happened there, and this is the kind of series that is why I always say, whenever we go to 5, when it's a potential reverse sweep, I always say it. Preventing a reverse sweep is harder than getting the 5th game win in a reverse sweep. I think when you have that momentum back, when you're the 2 wins in a row going into game 5, it is so much harder if you're the team that was up 2-0 that now has to defend in that 5th game. Like you are in a much tougher position, I would even argue, than the team that was down 0-2 was in game 3. Like you're like in a really rough spot because it's the momentum shift is like double the negative momentum that KT had in game 3. So it's really, really tough, and I think Dplus just couldn't handle it for many reasons.
The POM went to perfect, 8 out of 13, and it wasn't a full bot row vote, but media to Digic also going with him. You voted for aiming. Analysts voted for aiming and Cuz, which I think is criminal. Cuz is not allowed to get it.
I'm sorry, Cuz, but no, you're not allowed to get it. This one.
You look at the perfect scoreline, right? And it wasn't anything too crazy to me. Like, what do you think of that? Because to me, this felt like a pretty clear aiming shout out. Like, aiming to me is the best player in form for KT, and then showed it again here, especially with effort. Just having, like, again, we're not exonerating. We are putting a lot of the focus onto Cuz, but effort was his play was ass. His shot calling, okay, cool, but his play was so ass.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
And then
His
Perfect
Nautilus
was still
was
there.
so bad.
It was so bad, man. I was like,
and that's his iconic pick. So I don't think that Perfect had a bad series by any means.
No.
But I don't think, when I think about this series, I'm like, everyone had their moments, right? BDD got the game and series ending shove, right? The Emperor's Divide. He played Azir in game 5. Perfect handled the pressure really well in certain situations, was able to team fight decently. You've got Cuz, who had a really good Poppy game. The Poppy was his standout game, I would say. Effort had his Blitzcrank moment. And then I just thought otherwise, aiming's positioning was phenomenal, right? The Yunara game, the Sivir game, like the Yunara game was actually insane. Like I voted for him basically for that alone. He just said, I'm gonna lock the fuck in. And He was able to avoid the impale from the Skarner. Like, he was so on point in that game. That might be one of the best individual AD carry performances I've seen this year, considering everything that was going on, the situation, how many threats there were to kill him, how well he played, how long he held his flash. And I mentioned on the cast kind of jokingly, sometimes it was like he held his flash so long that by the time he did flash, it was like, actually, I don't think you needed to flash. You did everything correctly. But he was like, just in case, like, I will flash here, but I want to showcase that, like, maybe I can position so well that I don't have to. It was just it was a masterclass. And without his performance there, they don't get to game 4. They don't get to game 5. And so I had to go aiming. Like, I just had to do it. And I thought he deserved it. So you could suggest, I don't think Korean voters really do this. You could suggest that it was a top gap because the enemy top laner threw the last 2 games away. So that therefore it's perfect. But the Korean voters don't really do that. That's not really a thing we do here, in my opinion. And also, Perfect was gapped in some games. Like, he actually had a lower impact than Siwoo did, even in the games where, like, Siwoo threw at the end, but, like, Perfect wasn't, like, dominating him in those moments. So I don't know. I didn't really get it, but I think Perfect is very popular right now. And he also, you could argue, next to aiming, made the least mistakes in the series, I guess. So maybe that's part of
He
it.
did
Because
his
aiming
job,
didn't
but
look good in the first 2 games because of the support situation. So maybe voters were like, I don't know. It's maybe aiming was part of the problem there, but
I just, for me, there's, aiming comes with his own baggage, and I feel like that's preventing people from acknowledging how great of a year he's having, both from an individual perspective and in the scheme of the league. Like, he is
I agree.
he is a top 3 AD carry this year. Like, I have him ahead of Ruler, behind Peyz and Guma, but ahead of Ruler. And I think with the slumps, and like I said it, BDD was quiet as hell in the first series. He didn't make mistakes, but he also didn't make impact in the first couple, while Effort and Cuz were like floundering. And maybe that's why, because, mid jungle, mid support duo, if they're not going off, it's just mid. But it just felt like he didn't press to try and find the angles. And in those quiet moments throughout the year, aiming has been consistent. Aiming has had a hell of a year. And so just another time where I'm like, damn, am I really out here campaigning for aiming? I am.
I think that there's a lot of controversy in his past, and people struggle to look past that. I think that is one of the things that um that has held back him from getting a lot of accolades that I think he deserves, because he is really, really, really good. You regardless of what your opinion is about, his past, right? I think we can objectively say that his play on the Rift is out of control good right now. And I think
Yeah.
that, like, I can say that without, acknowledging any of the stuff that makes people reluctant to say that, because I'm just watching it with my eyes and he's playing in our league, and we have to just, I think, be honest about how dominant he has been and how consistent he has been. And that's always been, like, the thing about aiming for me that I've found to be one thing that holds, like, when you watch all of his gold kings every week rolling in, and you're like, okay, KT's doing decently well, but, like, aiming is doing incredibly well for
Mhm.
KT's farming well, they're giving him all the resources, but oftentimes he would just get blitzcrank hooked, and you're like, well, that's the game. Or he would get caught, or he would try to be greedy. He would, Ezreal shift forward to try to look for a kill and then die and cost his team the game. He's not making those mistakes anymore, I feel. I
No.
feel like he's, for the most part, gotten past that. So all of his good parts that we had before are no longer held back by him kind of sometimes running it down a little bit or kind of inting. And so he's God tier, like, that was his weak point. It feels like that's mostly gone. So I'm really enjoying watching him.
Yeah, I feel like aiming last year is Ruler this year, but without a good enough team to cover for the oopsies. Like, Dplus just wasn't good enough last year. If aiming got caught, and especially the way that it functioned, right? They were funneling a lot of gold into him. He'd die. And now, not that all the gold is going into him this time, but as other parts are falling around him, he's just eased up those moments, played on the knife's edge, and most of the time it's come up heads, and that's been pretty awesome to see. So, all right, that was a lot of KT glazing, and I think we touched on the gameplay enough with Dplus. You brought up this concept earlier. I wanted to come back to it. This Dplus roster and this Dplus core is just. I'm just worried that because so much of their makeup is losing in these heartbreaking fashions, as we said, cvMax's style is going to sink or swim by the end of this year. Because now cvMax is part of these soul-crushing losses, and he can't shout his way through it. He has to coach his way through it, and it could become a mental block here because, you know, Lucid struggling at Worlds during his rookie year, having the shakes, and then the types of losses that they had last year. Now another big loss here. They lost over in LCK Cup. They're good enough to know that they're good and can be great, but haven't been able to show it now for the last 3 big playoff kind of setups here. And with Worlds qualifiers to road to MSI qualifier, LCK Cup playoffs into road to MSI qualifiers. I'm just worried that they might start to get the losers mentality, and that if that isn't the focus here and aren't the tools to help fix that, you're just going to get angry cvMax and not someone who can help work through that psyche.
This team peaked at Kespa Cup. Like, I know that's crazy to say, and obviously Kespa Cup didn't have GenG there. But they peaked at Kespa Cup. At Kespa Cup, Showmaker was the best mid laner in the tournament. Chovy wasn't
By
there.
far.
But like, he was better than Faker. And he was definitely looking a lot better than BDD, who was also not there. And I'm actually blanking on Zeka. Yeah, he was looking much better than Zeka. And I think that, like, he came into the early parts of LCK Cup with a lot of momentum, and there were only good things to say, right? Because they overperformed at Kespa Cup. They did really well there. Ultimately didn't make the finals, but was pretty close. Were very close to, and couldn't get across the line. But then, you know, issues started to stack up. Shot calling issues started to stack up. Career started to make mistakes, especially early on in LCK. We were like, ooh, Career, I don't know. And then he turned it around right now, but there's still other issues. But it just feels like there's always something going wrong. There's always some problem. And I think the two things we know about cvMax in terms of post game, I'm not going to talk about like running back, you know, Pantheon, Talia, and like how he runs back drafts. We don't even have that anymore because Fearless. I think the two tendencies we know about cvMax very well, because it's been documented, he's even said it in interviews, is that A, he really, really, really values solo queue during these breaks. He usually makes his players spam solo queue games, like an insane amount of them, and will almost give them like solo queue assignments and rewards. That's been something he's done. So he and Bulldog got along really well, I'm sure. But he also is known for, which has also been documented recently, you know, kind of having an aggressive tone that I think I would call it at times condescending, you know, like where he'll essentially bring everyone into a room and be like, is this League of Legends that we're playing? You know, are you guys actually a team that made it to round 2 of round MSI? Because that's not what I saw out there. You know, that's not what I was watching out there. Let's talk about like what was going on with this rotation shoe. Where was the vision Career? Instead of being like, hey guys, like I think we need to figure out a better way to communicate how vision's going down where we're side laning. You know, I think this was an issue we had, because I think that's the way most Korean coaches approach the start of a conversation like this, is like, hey, this seems to be a problem. What do you think? And then, you know, sometimes a player in this situation, like in Career's case, might be like, well, actually, I want to defend myself because I was worried about this and that happening on the other side of the map. And I knew he didn't have vision, but I thought, okay, we're probably going to, okay, I took a calculated risk, whatever. And those kinds of discussions will happen. I think when cvMax takes the floor and says, you know, like, what is going on with this vision? I mean, is this how you play support Career? It might lead to a moment where Career, because he's super young, just shuts down, doesn't say anything, doesn't defend himself, doesn't actually offer any discussion, and then might just default into always wording the way cvMax mentioned in this one specific case, when that doesn't always apply, because the real issue is communicating with your team and finding out where that vision needs to be. So I don't know what happens outside of the content in terms of cvMax's coaching style overall, but in the dramatic stuff that we see, which I think is obviously a lot of it being showcased is the most dramatic and most interesting, right? It's content that people want to see. In the more measured discussions, maybe they don't upload those ones. But like, I think given his coaching style, I don't want to see spam solo queue. I don't think that's the answer here at all, and I don't want to see, um, a you guys aren't doing League of Legends properly. Like, you need to rethink everything that you're doing, and you need to do exactly what I say. And I think what needs to happen is a real open discussion amongst all of the players. And I think Siwoo needs to get a voice. I think Siwoo needs to have a voice. I think he needs to be given a voice. If I were cvMax, I'd be like, Siwoo was talking. Like, actually, if I were in this situation, I'd be like, Siwoo, you died here. What was going through your mind? What were you thinking about? And I'm not doing this in a passive aggressive way. What do you think went wrong here? I want him to say it, and then let everyone else react. And then, like, that's, I think, how you handle these types of situations when you want to break down that type of play in this team. Not in every team, okay? But in this team, I think with Siwoo being such a silent person, and now what we see in the content is he and even Showmaker shuts down, sometimes doesn't say anything. I think that needs to stop, because I don't think that's healthy right now for this team. It might be healthy in some situations. I think that coaching style can work when a team is their egos are like through the roof and they're not playing well, and you need to like be like, you guys need to sit down and pay attention, because this is not good League of Legends at all. But I don't think that's the situation we're in, because they were playing good League of Legends for 90% of those games, right? They just couldn't get the 10%. So we'll see. I agree with you, because I worry that his style might just grind this team into dust, and then they will be this like a winless team in the Legend group where competition is quite stiff, including KT Rolster, who they will face 2 more times.
Yeah, and his style has led him into some trouble here at the end. How much trouble that actually is, who knows? But in the post-game interview, cvMax had a suggestive, shall we say, comment here, Wolf. Around the 4-minute mark of the post-game interview, he's sitting there with Lucid, who looks like his soul has been sucked out of him. He says, I think our execution on that detail wasn't smooth. The opponent definitely responded well as well, and it just felt like we did foreplay and it ended. How should I put it? I feel like we can have feedback on such points afterwards. Basically, he's insinuating that there was foreplay and no climax, which, using that in a professional setting in a post-game conference, is not the play. Dplus Kia then comes out with a statement, obviously, and says, we sincerely apologize for the concern caused to fans and members of the esports industry due to the inappropriate language used by head coach cvMax during a recent media interview following the Road to MSI match. Taking these matters very seriously, we deeply recognize the importance of appropriate language expression and the accompanying social responsibility when communicating with the media and fans. cvMax recognizes the seriousness of this matter and is deeply reflecting on his words and actions. We will implement the following measures: comprehensive review our internal media communication guidelines, and we will take appropriate and internal disciplinary measures regarding the head coach and reinforce professional conduct training for meaningful improvement. I mean, this is cvMax, Wolf. Like, he's had his social media improvement, professionalism training multiple times, and
I think this is like a little rage leaking out, right? Obviously, in these interviews, cvMax has generally been, I think he's been very pointed and like has been a bit prickly, but usually not like this.
not
Like,
inappropriate.
he hasn't really. Yeah, I mean, this would be, I think, considered by most Koreans inappropriate. So the word. So I actually haven't seen a video of this interview. I don't know if there were any videos taken of this interview. However, on FM Korea and other sites, I've seen the line that he used. If you go to like Invin, for example, where they posted an article about it, they took his line out of their article, and all of the comments are just like, "Why'd you take that out?" Which is traditional Korean netizen rage, right? Is like, I just want to see the part that is the bad part. I don't even want to read this article. I can't believe you guys took that out. They took it out because you guys said you were mad about it and that it was inappropriate, so they don't want to put that in their article. But anyway, he basically said in Korean, literally, like, he didn't say foreplay. It's like the best translation is foreplay, I guess, for the sentence. but it's basically like caressing or like almost like stroking. Like, you know, it effectively is foreplay. There's a very sexual connotation to what he said. And I think everybody knows what it means. I mean, I think when you hear that, you're like, whoa, I wouldn't say that in an interview. But that is kind of what happened, right? You know, we didn't actually get to the end. And so, like, that to me is just cvMax lost his cool. I don't think that I've seen a few comments here or there of people being like, maybe they'll finally, this will be how they'll get rid of him and have him step down. They need him, guys. They need him so badly. There is no replacement. Like, who replaced Odin? Still waiting. They need him. He's part of this roster. They spent a lot of money to get him. They got him early and decided to stick with him. They are not going to fire him over this. He knows it as well. He probably apologized because I guarantee you guys, cvMax, the second he said that, he was like, in his mind, he was like, really shouldn't have said that. You know, like probably crossed the line there. He's very aware. I don't think he needs training, but if people are mad, Dplus has to make a PR statement about this. And Dplus has improved a lot about their PR. If anyone remembers the 2021 Twitter incident and everything that went down with that, we've gotten a lot better since then. But I think this is, frankly, like, I'll be really honest. I think cvMax saying this is, I think people should look at it in the sense that he is incredibly frustrated. Like, he is so incredibly frustrated. I think that if you're a Dplus fan, you also feel the frustration, and to take it out on cvMax, who's feeling the same frustration as you guys are, is not necessary. I think he probably should have been disciplined for this. I think it's not an appropriate thing to say probably in a post-game interview that's public, right? But don't, like, I don't want to see any cvMax trucks over this. Like, he's probably going to apologize on his stream. They already made the statement. Let's move on, please. I don't want this to be a drama I'm hearing about in round 3. Please, God, do not bring this up anymore.
All right, that was that. I just wanted to touch on it. Just, I think "you are the ace of losing" is like one of my favorite lines ever, and this one, it's a line, but not my favorite line. You are the ace of losing. That is crazy for me in the West. Speaking of crazy and the ace of losing, the Bros tried to pull out their ace in Game 3, which did nothing in the series beforehand. The Bros fell to Dplus Kia the day before in that round 1 matchup. It was exciting. Game 1 was exciting, Wolf, until it wasn't. The Bros had a pretty stranglehold of the lead. They're playing well. They're playing macro. And then in a mid-push, I think Gideon stayed a little bit too long. And then Casting TP'd into 5. And then they tried to save Casting. And then in a gold deficit in a game they had no reason to win, Dplus then just run down mid and end the game and effectively end the series, because the Bros were broken after that. You got a Roamer game where he wasn't inting his face off in Game 1. Like, everything was going the way of the Bros until that play. And then Game 2, nothing really works. Game 3, they sub in Brokey. Loki comes in for the first time since the swap to Roamer back at the Roadshow. And it just looked more of the same. I think at that point already, Teddy was on Ezreal. He was a little tilted, tries to shift over the wall to pick up a kill. He shifts into like a Xin Zhao and dies, or I think it was Xin Zhao. And at that point, the game was over. It really didn't matter if Loki was in there or not, unless he was going to be the Peter type sub, the energy, the picker upper, the one that's going to be like, all right, guys, it's everything's good. Didn't quite look like that. He just played Talia. Didn't do much.
I mean, there were so many problems in this game. Like, career popped off. Smash got 8 kills. They played Jason to Sion. I mean, the list goes on, right? So Luz has been incredible on the Wukong, as we saw him do again into KT the next day. My thing about Loki is, you remember when Loki was announced?
Super excited.
Well, I don't know if it was when we first talked about it, if it was leaked or announced, but whatever. I remember the first time we talked about this, you and I, my take on it was, I don't think this fixes the bros, but it's a huge opportunity for Loki, right? Like my take back then was Loki took a break. That can be career ending. Now he's back here. He's a free agent in a period where Bro needs to fix their mid lane. He could seize the opportunity. I don't think he did. And I think that Hanj and Brion decided very quickly that they were not going to give him those chances anymore, and they just decided Romer was the guy. I legit think it's in everyone's best interest now to let Loki go. I
Yeah.
like holding him in this contract might end his career if he's just going to be on the bench for the rest of the year, or if he just plays here and there randomly, but isn't, like in this series where he obviously doesn't have the same synergy level that Romer has, or turn him into a content creator or do something, because I feel bad for him, but he didn't seize the moment. And I don't think that means necessarily that his career should end and they should just sit on the bench for the rest of this year and collect his salary, and then I don't know, do whatever he wants to do after that, go to a minor region, like Latin America or something. That could be what happens. But I just think he was utilized incorrectly, but he didn't earn his spot, and I think that's what, for me, I thought this was all going to be about, is Loki can pop off, he can be better than be better than Romer, and jumpstart his career into a position where he could be an LCK mid laner for years to come. There's been many mid laners that were able to at least get to a point where they could stabilize and be in the LCK, opening, like Bulldog. Like he could have done that. He couldn't do it. So I don't even understand why Brion put him in that last game. We speculated on the space that maybe they just were like, we're losing this series, you can play one more game. And they already decided they're going to let him go. Maybe that's what they did. I really hope not, but teams do that sometimes, just like, all right, Romer, let's let Loki lose one more game, and then we'll call it an MSI Road. I don't know. I didn't like it, dGon. It was a rough series.
Going back to your original statement, because I was excited because Loki had himself. He was one of the best players on Cloud9 at that time. What is the problem with the bros then? Because for me, it is mid lane. It is mid lane, and I was talking with someone about it. There just isn't an answer. We don't have an answer for someone to be a mid laner ready to go, unless you're maybe taking like Quid back from NA. Like, where are you going to get the talent that can challenge Faker, Jovi, Showmaker, BDD, Zeka? Like, Zeka is the new one out of that, and he won a world championship. And maybe, like, okay, we just talked about Showmaker kind of fading a little bit, and BDD kind of faded in that last series. But when Romer plays well, they are one of the best teams in the league. They can beat the top teams. Let me rephrase that. They're not one of the best teams in the league. They can beat the top teams. But when Romer plays poorly, it's like maybe Teddy can carry. It's back to what we thought the ceiling of this team was. And so to me, it just feels like mid is the problem. You had to try Loki. Romer functions with the team better than Loki, but like this squad is not going to be able to compete. And I don't know how you can compete unless you have a guy. Unless you have a guy that can do it. Is it Daystar? Daystar used to be in the Bro Academy system. Like
Daystar is an option, I guess. Because you need someone who has, if you're going to play through Gideon is their best player next to Teddy, right? Like you could say in some ways Gideon is better than Teddy. Teddy's more consistent, whatever. Gideon gets them a lead. They get to the late game. Teddy does the job, right? So maybe you could put them just in the same best players on Bro category. The core of Bro is these two players. And if you don't have a mid laner to play through, if your jungler is one of your best tools and is playing the early game really well, but mid is no prio, then Gideon has to like try to get casting ahead or try to play through the bottom lane, but know that the enemy mid laner might be there. It makes Gideon's life really hard, but he's still been able to do pretty well, I think, in those circumstances. But you need somebody like even Daystar who's got that aggressive tendency, I think, to play with Gideon. And both Loki and Romer don't have that. They're very slow, sit back, they're like, you know, I talk about the archetypes of players a lot, and especially in support. We talk about the Barrel Hens archetype. They're like the Fisher archetype, you know, where it's like I'm never gonna try for a solo kill. That's not who
Yeah.
I am. That's not what I do. I am just going to go through this laning phase. And yes, I know Romer did get the solo kill in that one moment earlier this year, but overall,
Well,
that's not
yeah,
the playstyle he has. He's not
yeah,
he's not that type of player where he's like constantly threatening with electrocute procs every time. He'll drop like 3 minions to try to have kill pressure. That's not normally what he does, outside of a few champions like Akali.
yeah. That's what I was gonna say. He is. If I need to play aggressive champion, I can play aggressive champion aggressively. But if I'm on a, like a mage, I'm going to farm and wait for the setup to happen and not
I will
make
be
the
20
things
CS
happen.
down on Annie. I will be
Yeah,
20 CS down on
exactly,
Annie. I will.
exactly. Also, I misspoke. Daystar wasn't in the Bro Challenger system. It was Starlit. Starlit was in the Bro Systems Academy because when I was doing interviews in 2025 with the visiting the boot camping teams, I was like, "Hey, who's someone that has stood out to you?" And they're like, "In our scrims, we've scrimmed Bro Challengers, and that Starlit kid is crazy. He flips the game." And so it seems like under a different coaching staff,
Yeah, maybe.
they're like, "We moved on from him. He's not there anymore. He's a free agent, actually." But if aggression is what they needed to not just have a black hole in the mid lane. But then you go back to the same problem of like now you just got a coin flipper that you got like UCal, like a worse UCal. I don't
But
know.
you need
Like it
that. I think this roster needs that archetype of mid laner to play through. And I would say, by the way, generally speaking, Faker is not in that archetype. He was in his very early years of
Yep.
being like the solo kill guy, but he's the I push wave, I roam. You know, I'm going to in matchups that are not favorable. I'm not going to try to outplay them. I'm just going to know my role and then do my job later. But Showmaker and Chovy and Zeka, they are the aggressive archetype. You know, they will kill you. They will play that way, which is why Kanavi, for example, has tons of agency. It's why Canyon has tons of agency because he's playing with Chovy, and Chovy's always gonna have that prio. He's always gonna be threatening the kill. He's always gonna give Canyon. He's always gonna give Canyon that like. Canyon's gonna knowingly look over his shoulder and be like, "How's that mid lane going? Is there kill pressure there?" You know, they're gonna like give each other that knowing glance, and maybe something will happen there. But I think when you're Gideon and you look over at mid lane and every time he's a wave behind, oh now he's 2 waves behind, he's lost a plate. You're like, Romer did a lot, by the way, in some of their wins from behind. Like he had so many good games where he's like 0-3, 0-2 coming out of lanes, like 0-3-1, and then has the Annie stun to win the game. And you're like, wow, okay, well he did his job really well. He knows how to do the team fighting. It's just that you don't get the leads that you need to have if you have a mid laner like this. And more recently, that's been a problem because I think in the early parts of the season, even though they didn't play through mid that much, Gideon got the bottom lane leads that they needed to have, and Bro played through early game leads a lot. But I don't know what's gonna happen. I just free Loki, get him out of here. I think this didn't work out. You know, it's not like necessarily his fault. It's not necessarily the whole team's fault, but his play style didn't work. It didn't give him enough time. He didn't rise to the occasion, right? And it's not like he played badly, but he didn't play well enough to change the trajectory of this team. So they stuck with Romer, which makes sense. But now, like, let's figure out how to let Loki go, I think.
Wolf. There are 2 contracts that go through 2027. You want to take a guess at whose contracts are 2027 for
Well,
Hanj
the
and
fact that you're
Brion?
asking me right now is probably Romer and Loki.
It's definitely Loki. The other one, I'll just give it to you because I didn't do a good job setting it up. Is Coach Song. So everyone else is a 2026 contract, including their academy team, including Teddy. And I this kind of move makes me wonder. Then, are you going to give them time? Like either one, are you just going to give them time? Like give them time and let them flip games like that. But then you have Teddy, who's on the aging side, and is like, well, you have Gideon, whose upside, whose up potential is there, and he's like, well, maybe this is my chance to get onto a other team, onto a KT or something like that. I don't know. Like, I don't think they would let go of Cuz, but I'm just saying, like,
My
They
frustration is
don't
dGon the
have a plan.
I think I think you don't wanna just coast through the second half of the year and be like, "Let's figure out how to rebuild because this didn't work." I think that's the wrong mentality because I think this roster legitimately has core pieces. DRX won Worlds in 2022, and nobody really thought there was any chance that that sixth place team could do it. I look at this sixth place team and I'm like, I think there's something there. You know what I mean? I think there's actually really a lot of potential in this roster. They have some issues they need to fix. Maybe Romer will eventually just click and hit his like massive solo queue performances where, by the way, he is the monster. Like he has been the aggressive archetype, right? I was talking about before in solo queue. It's what he's known for, in fact. Maybe all of that clicks at some point and they can get out, but it would be such a tragedy if they like get another top laner or something and they just do the bro thing where they're like, let's just experiment more. I think you just stick with this roster with Romer and you keep iterating and you keep trying to improve because I do think there is some magic here.
Yeah.
By the way, I think this team has more potential than Dplus Kia. I actually believe that right now, and I think Dplus like they beat them, they got ahead. Hanjin Brion is not in a good place right now, but at their best, I think they're better than Dplus Kia. When they were having that run where they almost beat T1, right, and then they had that tough strength of schedule coming up, they that seemed to break them. They haven't been able to recover since. But when they beat KT, for example,
Yeah.
twice, like that form for Hanjin is better than Dplus Kia currently. I think they could have been a legend team, and I really believe that. Everyone's off the hype train now because they're not. And I'm not just saying I'm back on the hype train. I'm just saying that is in this team. I think
Yep.
that potential is better than Dplus's potential. But will they realize it? I don't know. But I hope so. And that's why I'm so sad they're in Rise because I think they won't be tested as much and they won't be able to pull that potential out. And that's what's so tragic about this roster for me. I really think they could have done the bro meme, like going to Worlds, it's happening. If bro go to Worlds and bomb out in quarters, but they make quarters, isn't that so sick? Like I'm not even sad about that. If they bomb out in quarters, they're a representative for our region. That could happen still. I don't think it's gonna happen. I'm not predicting it, but I love the idea that I think that at their best, it could have happened.
Well,
And maybe they can come back.
you brought up a good point of the bros going to Rise. I hadn't even sat down and thought about it. I think this is the time. Like the mid laners that Romer's going to play against do have the potential of popping off. Even Vikla, right? Even Vikla. But then you are getting the opportunity to now try that aggressive play style so that when you go and face Faker again, you know it's in you. Like to me, this is a Romer hyperbolic time chamber. Like don't worry about results. You just got to be top 8. Honestly, you have one team to beat, which is one of BNK, Kiwoom, or Nongshim. And Nongshim look like they're exploding. Go test. Don't be afraid of losing the game. Don't be afraid of losing the series. You have amassed that small lead that you've got a couple of games that you can work through so that you can be prepared to play against those legend group teams. Because last year, Nongshim didn't make it out, right? Nongshim had to play in the playoffs, play-ins against the Rise group teams and lost. They didn't make it out. It was BNK and Dplus that made it through. So for me, it's use this time to get in that hyperbolic time chamber to make a run. So there you go. All right. That was a lot of mid-table yapping, Wolf. We've got Road to MSI, Hanwha versus T1, GenG versus KT, and then probably GenG versus somebody. Sorry, KT. How do you see this one playing out pretty lightly? Because we've talked about it before, and we're about to see it here in a couple days.
I think just to talk about it, in the briefest sense of expectations coming up for this roadshow this weekend, look, I think no one is expecting KT to beat GenG. I know someone hearing that sentence is going to be like, but that's exactly why they will, because that has happened a lot. I don't think it's going to happen this time, and I don't even want to like entertain the meme. because KT are not coming off of momentum, right? They are coming off of like basically what felt like an 0-5 loss that they were able to still somehow win. That's very cool. That was a triumph. I think if they had won a reverse sweep game like that against like T1 or HLE or GenG, then you'd be like, damn, they've got so much momentum. Like no one thought they could do it, and they like were losing. But Dplus looked kind of pathetic in a lot of ways, and they like barely beat them. And you know what I mean? With the context of this, I still want to entertain the thought. I've already put my prediction in officially. It's a 3-0 GenG. I feel very confident in that.
Yeah.
HLE T1 is where the real where the real storylines might start to diverge. Obviously, there's a rivalry there that we've talked a lot about on this show with the ex-T1 players on Hanwha Life Esports. I think the crowd will be super legit. I think it's going to be very, very fun. I also think that when you look at the core parts of these rosters, you know, it's Kanavi who's in form, Owner who's a little bit shaky at the moment, but then Peyz, who is looking really, really good right now, has been set up for success versus Guma, has been weak sighting, you know, hasn't been played through that much, has not had as much success as Peyz. Like he's not picking up the big pentas, you know, back to back to back, where, you know, they're just playing through their solo laners and Kanavi instead, which is they've been winning, so that's fine. Like it's, you know, it's Guma is not actually, you know, you play a JRPG and you have like one of the characters who's like not in the main party, like they're just kind of in the
Yeah.
bench, like they get subbed
Yeah.
in sometimes. That's where Guma's at right now. Like he's your favorite character, you know, but like right now the dungeon you're in, they're weak to fire and Guma's water damage, so like, you know, he's got to sit on the bench for a little bit. That's kind of like how they would see the meta, and Guma's still doing fine. Like he's doing a great job, but I think Peyz, T1 have decided the opposite, and they want to play through Peyz, and they're not playing through Doran, they're not playing through Faker as much. They're just facilitators for Peyz. So stylistically, really big difference between these two teams. I give the edge to T1. I think they've figured out how to play through Peyz really well, but I kind of feel like it's a 60-40 for me, or maybe like 55-45. I'm not trying to tell you guys that I think that HLE is past their peak, because in fact, the opposite. HLE have been improving as well. They've been slowing down the game. They've been looking a lot better in their flexibility of drafting and in how they assess game states, and they don't just send it or flip it as much as they used to. They usually flipped heads because they're really good mechanically, but you know, they don't even take those risks a lot of the time anymore against good teams. So they've evolved, and I think we're sending T1 and GenG, but I don't know that for sure, and that's exciting. That's interesting. You know, this is what we talked about last time. We don't actually know what's going to happen until we see it here this weekend, but I think if you're a KT fan, just see what happens. If you're a fan of any of those other teams, bring friends, you know, like you might get what you want, you might be crying at the end, because we just don't know. I don't think anybody can know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's really tough. Like I'm on the Hanwha side. I've been on the Hanwha side until proven otherwise, because they are really good at that early game play. And I know that when we think secondarily, we talk about Guma. When we think tertiary, we talk about Zeka's form, which Zeka has been legit one of the best mid laners in the league. You know who we're not talking about? If we talk about fourth, I don't know what's after tertiary, quadriary. We talk about the meta now shifting to engage supports for potentially a delight resurgence, which means quintessentially, pentasterially, Zeus has been quiet. And I think that because you had the lower lows of Doran at the beginning of the season, and then you had the Dolof game recently with them and him popping off, it's time for Zeus to step up. And if you take him on face value, I think it takes Zeus over Doran. Everything else is pretty close.
But Doran in best of fives always is Zeus' father, as we reminded everyone many times.
Many times. It happened again last year as well
on
in this
Father's
series.
Day.
This was the blind Camille steal, right?
Yeah, Kruglord. It was Kruglord. That's when.
Oh my god, dude!
Ronnie's last year. Kruglord.
It's time to right those wrongs. Give me 3-2 Hanwha Life Esports. I think It's all very, 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 very close because the form of
I
these
wonder
squads are great.
I wonder if, like, if Hanwha I think what it would be so cool, I think my most ideal, even though I'm predicting T1, I would say slightly, I think it would be so cool if HLE just showed up and said, "We're actually playing through Guma this best of 5." Like, surprise! You thought you guys could just play through Peyz and overcome Guma's weak side and just be like, "Oh, this is a bad matchup for them because they're not playing through Guma, but we're playing through Peyz, and Doran will be able to weak side top." And then they just hard go bottom lane, camp
Jamilio.
bottom lane, get Guma head. He's playing Lucian Milio. He's playing Callista. It doesn't matter. Just play through Guma. That would be so fun. That would be just so fun to actually watch Peyz and Guma go head to head with like Kanavi and Owner in a straight up 3v3 fight for the series, and they just completely warp their playstyle and catch T1 off guard. And then Guma gets to celebrate at the end after spending many weeks is just like, I'm 0-3 on Ashe, but I will do my job later.
Yeah, here's
I
an
think
arrow
that would
mid
be fun.
lane, Zeka. And he lands it, by the way. Goodness. Doesn't that feel like a smart coach thing to do of like, we haven't played it all year, but the meta kind of sliding toward it. Boom, Callista Renata. Don't forget how to play this early game. If you do, it's gonna run you over. Like, I can see, a smart coach move. Here we go. They won't be ready for it. They don't remember what this combo does, and one oopsie, 1 foot wrong, one auto attack on a minion because you think you can get it means your bot lane is boomed. I think that would be pretty interesting. Now, Owner has to come down here, but if Owner's down here, that means Kanavi knows where Owner is, so he can either try to fight him through it or steal all of his jungle and gank the top side. Like, that to me is what I want to see. I want to see a draft thing that's going to lead to some uniqueness because I feel like we went 5 games, Wolf, and we didn't see a lot of craziness. Actually, that game 5 of Dplus KT, you guys were hammering it on the broadcast. It was all these narrative picks. It was all like, damn, this guy has history with this champ. This guy has history with this champ. It was
Yep. We just
awesome.
went to comfort. We went to comfort there, which was fun.
Yeah.
We
But
had the Blitzcrank Poppy, which was cool, but otherwise it was pretty vanilla.
but like in LEC, like they pulled out the Nasus jungle, which obviously started by a former T1 product, Griffin, back in NA, showed it off earlier this year. But in game 5, Skumon pulls it out. Everyone's like, oh shit, is it going to work? And all of a sudden he gets an early kill and it snowballs and warps the game around this Nasus. Like, that is exciting. That is fun. And I think whoever does the sneaky draft, I think Hanwha and T1 are both equipped to try and come up with an answer in the game better than KC was against G2. They just felt like they were falling into the trap of Nasus because they hadn't seen a Nasus in a while. So then you have GenG versus T1 and Hanwha in our unique scenarios. You think it's GenG moving on through. I think it's whoever falls from the top side moving on through. I think it's Hanwha or T1. I think especially because Hanwha, the core of these guys, had this failure last year and experienced failure earlier this year. We talked about the resilience of KT. I think that was more of the buffoonery of Dplus and the lack of experience on how to close out a game. I think this Hanwha squad will be resilient no matter what the results are. Even if they go 3-2, they lose a lot. I would worry if they do pull out one of these Joker picks and it doesn't work and then they lose to T1. That might have some bearing because we all assume it's going to be a 3-0 for GenG, so they don't have to show off their prep. But mentally, I think these guys will be way more prepared to play in a loss, after a loss against T1, against GenG, unlike what they were last year, where they just got ran over by T1 in the second place match.
I think that one counter argument I could make for GenG, because I like your argument there for like whoever loses will have that extra edge. In some ways, whoever loses might be pushed to the brink and tested and exposed in some way, and for some type of weakness or some sort of draft quirk. Whereas I don't think GenG is going to be exposed at all. Like, I don't think GenG can even scratch the surface of GenG. So GenG might be able to basically hide everything and go into that final series regardless of opponent and be like, I'm fresh. You know, you don't even know what I'm gonna do. Like we could just do throwaway drafts against KT and dunk on them. Is what it feels like to me. And so maybe there's an extra X factor there. So we'll see. Again, like generally speaking, higher seed wins. You know, generally speaking, the team that has the tougher matchup and even in the loss like has the extra stage experience, the extra games played there. Like generally, you are right. I just think GenG is better than people think they are right now. And obviously the difference between second and third place is like so minute in terms of seeding for this as well anyways. So I'm hyped for it. I think it's going to be one of our I think last year we unexpectedly kind of had the tragedy of Hano, which was kind of fun and was kind of a banger, but it ended on such a boring 3-0 stomp note. I don't think that's what we're going to get. I think we're going to get 2 amazing series, and KT is also there.
Yeah.
We're going to get 2 amazing series this weekend. And we don't know how they're going to go. We have 1 third series that will be very forgettable, and that's what everyone is expecting. And I think expectations cannot be broken. Sorry, KT.
I gotta say, it did bring me such joy to see KT fans in Busan last year. I was like, oh shit, they did show up. Oh shit, there is a lot of them. Oh shit, they came to watch their team just be lambs to the slaughter. I'm excited to see them show up in Wanju again. The hope springs eternal. It reminds us why we love the LCK. It's because the fandom is massive. And then it also reminds us how massive the T1 fandom is compared to the massive LCK fandom. But KT fans will show up. And who knows? I mean, we all know, but maybe we don't know. Who knows? But you know that we will cover this next week after it's all said and done here on Let's Cover Korea. dGon here with Wolf. And you guys, hopefully, if you haven't already, like and subscribe in the Last Free Nation Network, whether that's on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy the podcast. Make sure to sign up for LFN Herald, our newsletter, pumping out all the news across all the different channels that we have. Nerd culture, sports, other esports, we got you covered. And make sure to tune in next week as we send our 2 champs. That sounds weird. To MSI. Bye-bye.